I hate how I look. If I try to take a picture of myself, I end up breaking down and sobbing. It's not just discomfort or insecurity, it's an overwhelming surge of emotions that hits me all at once. If someone posts a picture of me, my stomach ties up in knots. I almost feel sick, like I'm on the verge of throwing up. It's like the world suddenly becomes too loud, too close, and I crumble under the weight of it. To someone who's never experienced this, it might sound like I'm exaggerating. A lot of people say, oh my god, I hate how I look, but the kind of hatred I'm talking about is something deeper. It's not just dissatisfaction with a bad angle or a bad hair day, it's an intense, visceral feeling that runs so deep it feels like I can't escape from it. It's a self-loathing that feels unwarranted, but it clings to you and it's so hard to shake. If you relate to what I'm saying, I am so sorry. Because this isn't just about insecurity, it's a form of self-rejection that can eat away at your confidence, your joy, your ability to just exist in the world. You feel like you're constantly running from yourself, hiding from mirrors, dodging cameras, and avoiding anything that forces you to confront your own reflection. It's exhausting, and I know how heavy that weight can be, so I'm gonna tell you how we as artists can use exposure therapy to our benefit when it comes to warped self-image. I wouldn't wish this way of thinking on anyone. For some, these feelings originated from being picked on or ridiculed by your parents or peers, but if you're one of the lucky ones, like me, you did it to yourself. I was never picked on for my looks as a kid. I was often complimented. People told me I had beautiful curly hair and bright eyes. I was given a lot of praise, but I never believed any of it. Deep down, I thought people were just saying what they were supposed to say. They were being nice. I couldn't accept the kind words because I already decided I wasn't good enough for them. It's funny to look back now and realize how early this all started. I was dealing with so many emotions I didn't have the words for as a child. Anxiety was already gnawing at me, but I didn't know what it was. I would sob and beg my mom not to make me go to school because every day felt like I was walking into something terrifying, even though I didn't understand why. I didn't have the words for it, but I knew something was wrong. And that's around the time that my self-image issues began. I started doing these little things, looking back, were clear signs of my growing mental illness. I would cover mirrors when getting ready in the morning because I couldn't stand seeing my face. I stopped brushing my teeth because I had to look at my reflection for too long, but at the same time, I started counting how many pictures there were of me compared to my brother around the house. I was around 10 or maybe even younger, building this irrational narrative in my mind that I wasn't as loved or as wanted because there were fewer pictures of me. These small acts grew into a self-hatred that has lasted my whole life. I know how illogical it sounds. Even then, I knew it didn't really make sense, but when you're a kid, your brain can latch onto these ideas and they snowball into something so much bigger. I didn't even begin to unpack these thought processes until just earlier this year when I saw how many pictures of me were in storage. Turns out, my childhood self was wrong, but by then, the damage was done. I had already built a whole personality out of those assumptions. My insecurities, my self-perception, and even my relationship dynamics were shaped by this idea that I was unwanted and a burden. As I grew older, these insecurities didn't just fade away, they spread. They invaded my relationships, my social life, and how I present myself to the world. I never want to be in group pictures, I beg my family to not post photos of me, I avoid video calls and make excuses to avoid meeting people in person. I've convinced myself that no one actually likes me. Instead, I tell myself that people just stick around out of pity. I shrink myself so I won't be noticed, and that includes pushing my own needs and feelings aside. I used to pride myself on being easy to raise or easy to get along with, but as I got older, I realized that was just another way of saying I didn't allow myself to take up space. I didn't want to be a burden, so I made myself as agreeable and invisible as possible, but that meant I was never really present in any experience. If you're constantly thinking about how you're being perceived, how you're standing, how your voice sounds, if your hair is sitting right, you're never actually in the moment, you're just performing. But I want to believe that it's possible. Little by little, I can unlearn these toxic habits, and I can stop shrinking myself and start allowing myself to take up space, to be seen, and to be present. And if any of this resonates with you, I want you to know that you deserve the same. You deserve to exist in your own life without the constant pressure of wondering what others think of you. Anxiety is maintained and worsened by avoiding what you fear. That's the cruel thing about anxiety. It convinces you that avoidance is the only way to survive, but in reality, it's just making everything worse. The more you avoid it, the stronger the fear becomes. It's like feeding a fire you so desperately want to put out. The whole point is to learn to tolerate that gnawing sense of anxiety so it doesn't have so much power over you. By slowly and deliberately confronting what makes you anxious, you start to realize it's not as terrifying as your mind makes it out to be. The goal is to rewire the brain, to teach it that the thing that it's afraid negative, in reality is not as dangerous as it seems. Let me give you another example, one that's less about body image and more about something concrete. Grasshoppers. I hate grasshoppers with a fiery passion. They terrify me for no reason that I can explain. The thought of one jumping or flying sends shivers down my spine. If I wanted to tackle this fear through exposure therapy, I'd start small. First, I'd look at pictures of grasshoppers, simple, low-stakes exposure. Then I'd maybe go to a pet store and look at feeder grasshoppers from a distance, no touching, no interacting, just looking. Once I felt more comfortable, I'd gradually get closer, and maybe if I got extremely brave, I'd even hold one. It sounds kind of ridiculous, right? It's just an insect, but that's how exposure therapy works. It's not about jumping straight into your worst fear. It's a gradual process of getting your mind to rationalize the situation instead of defaulting to panic. In the case of grasshoppers, the rational question is, can a grasshopper kill me? No, of course not, but in that moment of fear, my brain makes it feel like it might. The point of exposure therapy is to shrink that fear response and replace it with logic and reason. Now this brings back to self-image, because that's where it gets tricky. Body dysmorphia, or just an intense discomfort with your appearance, is often treated with a similar approach, depending on your mindset. And while I'm not going to self-diagnose, I relate to many of the symptoms of body dysmorphia. In cases of BD or extreme self-consciousness, exposure therapy might involve slowly increasing your exposure to your own image. Maybe it's looking at a picture of yourself for a few seconds longer than you normally could, or it's spending an extra minute in front of the mirror every day. This might sound like tiny steps, but over time they start to chip away at that intense anxiety you feel when you see your reflection. And let me be clear, exposure therapy is not easy. It's uncomfortable by design, but in that discomfort is where the growth happens. The more you get used to the feeling of being uncomfortable, the more manageable your anxiety becomes. It's a practice that can be applied to so many areas of life. Whether it's grasshoppers or your own reflection, the principle is the same. Now, how can we as artists use exposure therapy to our benefit when it comes to warped self-image? The answer is simple: create. For me, I've decided to start drawing myself every day for the month of September. It's an experiment in both self-improvement and self-acceptance. I've wanted to improve my ability to capture likeness in my drawings for a while, and using myself as the subject is honestly killing two birds with one stone. Here's how I can do it. When I use a reference photo for a drawing, I approach it with an almost detached mindset. I look at it very objectively and in abstract terms. I'm just thinking, what shapes go where? This process allows me to remove emotion and judgment from the equation. I'm not seeing the face I've spent years criticizing. I'm just seeing a collection of line, shadow, and form. And because of that, I found that looking at an image of myself objectively without that emotional baggage has started to change the way I view my appearance. The features I used to pick apart, the things I hated, they aren't as noticeable when I'm breaking my face down into its basic structure. My mind shifts to the technical aspects of anatomy and form. Suddenly, my acne and my asymmetrical features aren't flaws to hide or be embarrassed about, they're just facts, part of the overall picture. They become just another element, like a shadow in a still life or the texture on a surface. They're there, but they don't dominate the image. My face has become just one among a sea of others, and I'm slowly starting to come to terms with the fact that this is my face. I'm stuck with it, and that's okay. I'm starting to accept that no one else is obsessing over my appearance the way I do. It's something people always say, no one cares as much as you do, and it's taking me a long time to let go. I know I'm not alone in this feeling. I know there are others who struggle with self-image in the same way, and it's comforting in a way. I'm not the only one who fixates on my imperfections or feels like I'm constantly being judged. And if you relate to this, I encourage you to make self-portraits. You don't have to be a professional artist. You don't have to experience something as extreme as what I've mentioned. Even if it's not for the sake of improving your drawing skills, I think practicing self-portraits can be a form of meditation and self-reflection. There's something about observing yourself from an artist's perspective, seeing yourself as a muse rather than an object of criticism. It helps you distance yourself from the negative thoughts that have built up over time. And who knows, maybe one day you'll look back on these portraits and see them as a record of growth, not as an artist, but as a person. Imagine looking back years from now, seeing the progression of how you view yourself over time and realizing how far you've come. After I finish this month of self-portraits, I don't think I'll keep drawing myself every day, but I do plan on making it a regular practice. Even just drawing a self-portrait once a week feels like a way to continue building a healthier relationship with myself. I'm actually starting to look forward to being in my content one day. I used to dread the idea of showing my face in videos or photos, but now I'm excited to see how the shift in mindset translates to other areas of my life and how much more I can do when I stop obsessing over something I can't change. I can't wait to see the person I become, and I hope you'll be there to see it too.